So I am deeply moved knowing that this is the 25th year of our Yarchei Kallah, and by the knowledge that I've been here for each and every one of them. Koyeten Hashem v'koy Yosef, for many more wonderful years to come, b'siyata d'shmaya. That is a half yovel. And many of you probably have been here, like me, every year. And I said so many times that this is a real inspiration to see so many people, not koilel guys, but balabatim, each of them leaving his business, his family, his activities, his chesed engagements, just to come and learn Torah, just to come and once again feel what it is to sit in yeshiva and learn b'chavrusa and listen to different shiurim. So this is really an inspiration, and it means a lot to me. As my dear friend that Agudah mentioned, I'm just off a plane. I arrived some while ago. I never sleep on planes. I can't sleep, so I hope so. So this year we chose a quite complicated sugya in Din Nezikin. Tabach uman shekilkel. And as we will shortly see, there's a fundamental machlokes in the Rishonim whether the chiyuv of a professional that messed up his job and caused damage is that medinei mazik or medinei shoimrim. And this week we read Parshas Mishpotim. Parshas Mishpotim is the aside of dinei shoimrim on one hand and dinei nezikin on the other hand. So it's dova be'itoi ma toiv. Bava kamet tzadik tesum et beis. We find two sugyas, and these two sugyas are two sides of the same coin. Omer Shmuel, tabach umen shekilkel chayev leshalem. Maziku, poisheyahu, which immediately causes confusion. So what are we talking about? Mazik or poisheya? These are two different concepts. If he's a mazik, he's chayev without being a poisheya, because of Chov Zayin and Bavakama we learn Odom Ud Li'olam, Bein Shoigig, Bein Mezid, Bein Oines, Bein Rotzoin. So a mazik is not a poisheya. The very concept of poisheya is a concept of dinei shoimrim, not dinei nezikin. And the Gemara asked this question. Omer Shmuel tabach umen shekilkel chayev l'shala maziku poisheyahu nase koim aloi shchot li mekan v'shochet loi mekan. Lama leila meimer maziku poisheyahu. So the Gemara asked this very question. What is this dual, two different concepts? Lama leila meimer maziku poisheyahu. Eom maziku ave min hana melechad lo yovid b'schar. Avalechad ko'ovid b'chinam loi kamash malon poisheyahu. So on the maskon of the sugya, tabach umen shekelkel, there are two different dinim. If he's qualified, he is potter, but that is only if he works for free. If he's compensated, if he's getting paid, even though he is a mumcha and is qualified to do the job, if he's getting paid, he bears responsibility and he is liable. If he's not getting paid and he is qualified, potter. But if he's not qualified, then why did you do this? You know you're not qualified to do it. And therefore, in that case, he is a poisheya. And that is the Maskonas Halacha. And some in Shim Vav and Choshe Mishpat, I don't know where it is in our contrast, but you'll find it. Choshe Mishpat Shim Vav Siv Daled, Shulchan Aruch clearly says, if he is qualified and he is a mimcha, v'lo tzorech lehislamed, he doesn't need to do additional research or additional qualification, then he is potter. If he is qualified, then it's an oines. An oines is potter. So the fundamental halacha is, if he's getting paid regardless of whether he's qualified or not, he always is liable and he needs to pay the damages that he incurred. If he is not getting paid, then it depends. If he's qualified, potter. Not qualified, chayev. And the same blat, tzadik tes omid beis, itmar, hamara din al shulchani, v'nim tzara. Tana choda omen potter hadit chayev. Tanya idach ben onin ben chayev. And it also depends, is he getting paid or not? Mara din al shulchani. So in days of yore, when money was always precious metals, and there was a huge industry of counterfeit, of ziyufim, so the shulchani was the person qualified to test that coin and to determine, is it really silver? Is it really gold? What is the material this coin is made of? Maradin al-shulchani. And the shulchani gave bad advice. He was mistaken, same halacha. And a shivav, siv dalad is the din of tabach u'mishakolkal, sivav is the din of mara dina l'shulchani. The difference is, tabach u'mishakolkal, in the case in which he is chayev, has a din of a mazik. Mara dina l'shulchani is glame ben ezikin, but it is garami. And garami is chayev. If my memory is correct, I think some years ago, but I'm not sure, did we ever learn in this Yarchei Kallah the dinam of grama and garami? Or am I mistaken memory? I think we did. I give so many shiurim, I remember what I say, but I can never remember where and when I said it. I could never remember that. But I do recall, I think one year, the sugya we learned was grama and garami. So we want to get back into that sugya. But grama ben ezikin potter, garmi chayev, and maradin al-shulchani, he didn't cause damage biyadayim. All he did was give an eitzah, but that is the gather of garmi, and he bears responsibility. So there are two fundamentally different approaches to the sugya, the machlokes Tosfos and Ramban. What are we dealing with at the end of the day? Is it dinay shomerim or dinay nezikin? Tosfos maintains we're dealing with dinay nezikin, and this is a sugya of mazik. And that is the common denominator between tabach u'mishakilkal and mara dina l'shulchani. We're dealing with dinay nezikin. According to the Ramban, we're dealing with dinay shomerim. And the Ramban and Tosfos go l'shitosam. If we're dealing with din and ezikin, and the fundamental klal of mazik is oda muad liyolam, and a mazik is chayev even ba'onis, so how do we differentiate between a mumche and a person that is not a mumche? And how do we differentiate, if you're a mumche, then it's an oines, and if you're not qualified, then it's a pesheya? By din and ezikin, is there a difference? Tosfos l'shitosam. 3 times the Masechet Bava Kama. Primarily Chav Zayin Amid Beis, also Dalad Amid Aleph, and our Sugit Tzadik Tes Amid Beis, Tosfos maintains. Even though Oda Muad Liyolam, and a mazik is chayiv even ba'oines, not oines gomer. And the levels of oines depend. The Gneva or Aveda, oines gomer according to Tosfos is potter. So Tosfos L'shitosam says, our sugya is based on dinay nezikin, but nevertheless, there are different levels in oines. Oines gomer is potter, and therefore, if the person is qualified, then that's an oines, that's the level of oines, and therefore he's potter. If he's not qualified, he's chayev. How do we understand, according to Tosfos Udin and Ezekiel, why would there be a difference between is he getting paid or not? We could understand the difference between a mumche and a person that is not a mumche. If he's a mumche, then That's an oinus. If he's not a mumcha, why did he get into this? This is not an oinus. You shouldn't have been there. This is not your job. But how do we understand the difference between why would it make a difference whether he's getting paid or not? And this is a chiddush. The level of oinus is determined differently if you're getting paid or not. If you're getting paid, then svara is you take upon yourself more responsibility. So Toises l'shitosam, not every oinus is chayiv b'mazik. The Ramban disagrees with Toises, and the Ramban says even an oinus gomer is chayiv b'mazik, and therefore the Ramban says our sugya cannot be based on the din of nezikin, because if it is din and nezikin, there would be no difference between qualified or not qualified, mumcha or not a mumcha, even though a mumcha is an oinus, but every oinus is chayiv according to the Ramban, and therefore the Ramban's opinion is that we're dealing with dinei shoymrim. And if we're dealing with dinei shoymrim, then it's far easier and more misyashev alev the differences in the various details of this halacha. If you're getting paid, you're a shoym socha. If you're not getting paid, you're a shoym chinam. Shoym chinam is only chayiv b'poisheya. Shoym socha is chayiv b'gnei v'aveda. And therefore, if he's getting paid, even he is a mumcha, but a shoym socha is chayiv. How? Because this is not a oinus gomer. At the end of the day, you gave an opinion which wasn't right. You caused damages. So according to the Ramban, if we're dealing with dinei shoymrim, we could easily understand the difference whether you're getting paid or not, and also the difference between a mumcha and a person that is not a mumcha. Oinus and poisheya, different levels, shoym chinam and shoym sucha. So these two fundamentals in our halacha, the difference between are you getting compensation or you're not getting compensation, is it an oinus or a poisheya, are clearly understandable according to the Ramban. That is dinei shoymrim. Shoym socha and shoym chinam have two different halachas. Oinus and poisheya are two different criteria. According to Toises, the sugya is somewhat more complicated. So this sugya depends on the din of mazig ba'oinus. What is the machlokes Toises and Ramban regarding mazig ba'oinus? Toises Daf Dalet and primarily Daf Chov Zayin brings three rayas. Oinus gomer, even bedin and nezikin is potor. One is the Yerushalmi. If a person thrashed about the middle of his sleep, some people do that. Depends what kind of dreams you have when you're sleeping. And if he broke kalim in middle of his sleep, the Gemara says he is chayiv, and that is what the Mishnah means. Adam muzik li'olam. Bein shoigig, bein mezid, bein oines, bein rotzen, and a fellow yoshon is chayev. However, the Yerushalmi says that is only if I went to sleep and I was aware that somebody put down kalim right next to where I went to sleep. But if I went to sleep and there was nothing around my bed or where I was sleeping, and then when I was already asleep, a person put down kalim next to me, then he is potor. So Toises proves from this Yerushalmi, oinus gomer is potor. So if you went to sleep and you were aware there are kalim there, then when you broke the kalim, you're an oinus. You're in the middle of sleeping. You had no intention. But this is not an oinus gomer. You know yourself, and you should know that sometimes you're active and you're in motion in the middle of sleep. So that is not an oinus gomer. But if people put things next to me when I was already asleep, that's an oinus gomer. And that is why the Yerushalmi says, potor. That's the first raya. The second one is a Gemara Ksubis. Hiniach lehem avihem pora gezulo. A person passed away, and amongst all his other possessions, there was a cow. And his children, the hires, they yarshin the cow, they slaughtered the cow, they ate its meat, and then it becomes obvious that he stole that cow, and it wasn't his. The Yoshim Potor. Because that's an oinus. So Toisus once again proves, but Odam Amazik is chayev afilu b'yoinus. So why are the Yoshim Potor? Oinus gomer. Why would it occur to them that this wasn't their father's possession? The third raya is from our sugya, Tabach Uman Shekelko. He is an oinus, And nevertheless, if he's not getting paid, he is potor, and this is the third raya, Oines Gomer is potor, according to Tosfos. The Ramban, strangely, the first raya, from a person that went to sleep, and the Gemara differentiates, were the kelim there when he went to sleep, or were the kelim put there after he was already asleep? The Ramban says, Oines Gomer chayev. However, if the person who demands compensation, he was a pesheya, and he was the one that caused damage to himself, that patters the mazik. And therefore, even though Oines Gomer is chayev, but you demand compensation, but you're the one that put your vessels and your kelim next to me when I was asleep. So you bear more responsibility than I do. So how do you demand from me compensation when you are the one that is actually responsible for the damage of your kelim? The nafka mina between Tosfos and the Rambam, Reuven went to sleep, and Shimon took Levi's kelim and put them next to Reuven when he was asleep. Levi did no wrong, and Levi is angry. He says, I wouldn't put my kelim there. I just don't know who needs to pay me, Shimon or Reuven. So in that case, according to Tosfos, he would be potor. According to the Ramban, Reuven needs to compensate Levi, because Levi is not the cause of the damage to his kelim. So the Ramban deals with Tosfos raya, and the Ramban rejects this raya. Adam hamazik even ba'oines gomer chayev, but what patters him is the liability of the bala kelim, because he bears more responsibility for his damages than I do. And as I explained, the nafka mina between Tosfos and Ramban is, if Shimon put Levi's kelim next to Reuven when he was asleep. Tosfos totally ignores the raya of Tosfos from Heniach lehem aviem pora gezulo. And that is interesting. The Ramban doesn't deal with this kasha. Maybe the Ramban had a gersa in Tosfos in which Tosfos doesn't bring this raya. So in Mike Sovim, Minchas Osha and Bavakama. Oh, I should have brought a few Minchas Oshas and Bavakama, because there's a lot about Odom Amazik Ba'onis in that sefer, and I explained. Even according to Tosfos, that a Mazik Gomer is Chayiv. But many times in Shas we find an expression, 4 words, Mai Havelei Lemevad. And a person could never bear responsibility if it wasn't within his power to avoid or prevent this damage. Mai Havelei Lemevad. So the Mechlokes Tosfos and Ramban would be in a situation, a person goes to sleep, and somebody else put kelim next to him when he was already asleep. So even according to the Ramban, you shouldn't go to sleep b'reshus harabim when you are aware that people go through and fro, and somebody might put stuff next to you. So if you go to sleep, you need to bear in mind, this is the reshus harabim, this is a symptom. People might stand next to me, people might put things down next to me, and if you know you thrash about the middle of your sleep, then go to sleep at home and lock the room and you go to sleep. So, however, when the onus is in a level of a person cannot bear responsibility if it was totally beyond his control. And that is the situation of Heniach lehem aviem pora gezula. Chazoka masha tachas yad odam hu shelo. And that is a different sugya what has to do with cheskes moment and muchzak, but we find in the Gemara, Chazoka masha tachas yad odam hu shelo. Father passed away. He has 100 animals in his farm. Why would it occur to us, my havelei lemevad? And when we say my havelei lemevad, even according to Tosfos, he could bear no responsibility. And now comes the third raya of Tosfos, tabach uman shekilkal, and that is how the sugya ties into our sugya. So Tosfos proves, and that is the third raya of Tosfos, tabach uman shekilkal. Why is he potter? If he's a mumcha and he's not getting paid, he's potter. If we say every oines is chayiv, even oines gomer, then why is he potter? I think by this oines, we do not say, my havalela mevad. If you're a mumcha, you don't make mistakes. And if you made a mistake, then you bear a certain level of responsibility. Yes, you're not a pesheya because you're qualified. This is your job. But if you made a mistake, you messed things up, you passed the shchita, you verified a coin and you were wrong, it is an oines, but it's not the level of heniach lamaviyam por gezula. We cannot say, my havalela mevad. Havalela mevad. You should have known better. And if you are a mumcha, you don't make mistakes. So the Ramban writes, Tavachum and shekelkal, lav mishum maziku. So the Ramban does not ignore Toises Raya. Sosam velo perish. But what does the Ramban mean? The Ramban merely says, that is not din in Azik, and he is not a mazik. And the Achrayim don't come up with a reasonable pshat b'divrei haRamban. Minchas Osher an Bovekama, and it's a relatively new sefer. Chelik Beis Bovekama is supposed to be out mamish next week. I just got in from Chutzlatz. Maybe it is already off the printing press. So I wrote 2 simonim about mazik ba'onis. But what I say now is Torah Chadosha. It's not in the sefer. And recently I learned the sugi again, and this is what I came up with. I think, and let me give a short introduction. One of the yesodis I teach Talmidim is, when Rishonim say something with simplicity, it must be simple, and it cannot be complicated. If it's complicated, they should explain. So if the Ramban just says these strange words, Tabachum Shekilkel is not defined as a mazik. Why not? Why not? If it's complicated, if it's a Surah Mechudeshes, the Ramban would explain why. Lani is daiti. And I think this makes a lot of sense. Any nezek that is inevitable, it is inevitable, person does his job. A sheichet works maboiker ad erev. And it always happens. It is inevitable. Some shchitas go wrong. Cannot be different. It is routine. If it's inevitable and it's part of the routine of avodas hashchita, it is as if this is nature and there is no dinei nezikin. So this svara depends on 2 fundamentals. Todia and bilti nimna. It is inevitable. Every sheichet, always, this happens. And if it happens, we relate to it as if, don't know what to say, gzeres shemayim, nature, it's inevitable. It happens all the time. And therefore you need to bear in mind that a certain percentage of the animals will be nitraf. Bear it in mind and put it into the equation. As sheichet, some of the animals will always be nitrav. That is human nature. That is the way the world works. And the same is every craftsman or if it is inevitable, it is as if totally beyond his control, and we relate to it as if this is nature. This is the way the world works, and that is why the Ramban says, Tavach oman shekilkel is not dinei nezikin. It is a svara mechudeshes, but sometimes the svara mechudeshes, when you think about it, I think it makes a lot of sense. I had a very close relationship with the Sav al-Karuf, Reb David Lipschitz from America, and he was one of the youngest Talmidim of Reb Shimon Shkop. And many times I quote him I heard from him, and I haven't heard this from anyone else, any other Talmidim of Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon many times said a svara in yeshiva, and he said, a new svara is like a new suit. Person comes to the tailor, brings him, material, and he gets a new suit, and he puts it on. He doesn't feel so comfortable. The tailor says, come back in a week, take it home. You need to get used to it. You're going to get used to your new suit. You don't feel comfortable right now. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right. Let's talk in 10 days, the tailor says. Come back in a week, and in a week I'm sure you're going to love your suit. So Reb Shimon was a big mechadish, and many times he said, it's a new svara, but get used to it. And in Shuvas Rashba, there's a tshuva about migo lahoitzi, and the Rashba writes, I have a svara, chaverei chol kemalai, but it's just because they're not used to this svara. So the Rashba says the same, and the Rashba says, all my friends, Gedol HaRashanim, disagree with me, but it's just because it's new, and they'll get used to it. So Lanias Daiti, this is the way I understand the Ramban Tabachum and Shekilkel, and it's the nature of this job. A Shulchani sits where he is all day, from the morning to the evening. Every 5 minutes another one comes. This is the way the world works. And the same as a Shoichet that shechts animals, 100 animals every day. Some of them will be nitraf. Some of them are treifa miyikora, but some of them will be nitraf al yodoi, and that is not dina nezikin. Anything that is kavua and inevitable, according to Ramban, is not dina nezikin. So let's get back to the fundamentals of our sugya. So two drochim. Are we dealing with dinei shoymrim, or are we dealing with dinei nezikin? And this machlokes is dependent in the din of Odom HaMazik ba'oines chayev, because our sugya clearly differentiates between two different levels of oines, and that is the difference between a mumche and misha einoi mumche. So toisas l'shitosam, Odom HaMazik, there are different levels. There is an oines poto, there's an oines chayev. The Ramban l'shitosoi, almost every oines is chayev. I say almost because the Ramban gives different terutzim and the kashas and the rayas of Tosfos, and therefore the Ramban l'shitosoi, we're dealing with dinei shoymrim, and this depends on the interpretation of the Gemara. Mazaku poishayahu. So the Gemara does allude to two different possibilities. Are we dealing with dinei oinse, dinei mazik, or are we dealing with dinei nezikin? And now I want to share with you a psak I wrote many years ago in our Beis Din, and the way we analyze this psak. But in order to do so, we quoted two seifim in Siman Shin Vav. Shin Vav is dinei nezikin, and a Shin Vav, that is a siman dealing with our sugya. Siv Dalet is Tabachum and Shekilkal, and Siv Vav is Marad and El Shulchani, and both these sugyas are Bava Kamet Tzadik Tes Omid Beis, and that is the first blat in our Mara Mekaimis. Siman Kuf Chof Tes, and that is another source in Choshe Mishpot, Siv Beis. There are more rights, and I don't know whether Reb Shlomo, would we have that in our kuntras? The sugya in Kuf Chof Tes in Choshe Mishpot 59. Do we have the Shulchan Aruch? Yes, so as you see in the top of the page, we're dealing with Hilchas Orev, and the Ramah writes. The Mechaber writes, and this is Hilchas Orev, Omelem b'shas matn mo'asel v'ani yorev, nishta b'da orev v'einoi tzorech kinyan, afelu lo nis'arev behedya, rak she'oimer lemalva, lehalvois leloiva, ki matuachu. Person gave an eitzah. Somebody asked him, we're going back to Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. So Reuven asked Shimon, Levi asked me to give him a loan. Is he reliable? Could I give him a loan? do you think I'll get my money back? Afilu lo nis'arav behedya, rak she'omer lemal v'lehalvos leloy v'ki batuachu. Reuven tells Shimon, Levi is reliable, and he has the means to pay back this loan. V'aso al piv, v'hoyu sheker, chayev l'shalem loy. Dehave ki'ilu nis'arev loy. So Reuven tells Shimon, you could lend $100,000 to Levi because I know Levi has the means to pay back, and you could rely on him. V'hoyu sheker. And soon we will discuss, what does that mean, hoyu sheker? He's not reliable, or he doesn't have the money to pay back. But the Ramah says, even though he didn't mention the word orev, he didn't say, I bear responsibility, dinay ka'orev. And that is the Ramah. The source of this halacha is Tshuvas Mahari Weil, like the Darkei Moshe brings. Mahari Weil bases this halacha on Tabachuman, on Mara Dinner L'Shulchani. So the source of Mahari Weil is Dinei Nezikin. And Mahari Weil says, we have the Mahari Weil, but you could look at Bir Gro on the spot. On the spot, page 60, Siv Beis, Afilaloinus Arav Behedye Kamoi Mara Dina L'Shulchani, Ukamoi Shekosev Lakaman Shin Vav Siv Vav. That is the Sif we dealt with just a few minutes ago. So Mahari Weil, where is Mahari Weil? It's an important shuvah. Number 58, Mahari Weil was one of the later Ashkenazi Rishonim. So, this is a very old Yiddish or German. Second paragraph. Nelani is that Lafi Divrei Shimon. Shaloyam alay elo, das keren ist gewish. That means, the keren is guaranteed. You could lend them the money, it's guaranteed. Ein beloshen azeh loshen arvis. But nevertheless, he bears responsibility. And the last line of this tshuva, the last line of the page, mididahava maradina l'shulchani v'nimtzara. Some of the Yisrael bases this halacha on maradina l'shulchani. So why does the Ramah write it in Siman Kuf Chavtes? That is dinay orev. And also, the Lashon, the explanation of the Ramah seems to indicate that the Ramah sees this as a din and dinay avis, even though he didn't say, I am a orev. What does the Ramah say? Havele ke'ilu, as if ke'ilu nis arev loy. And even more than this. And Da'aka Moshe, the Ramah brings Tshuvas HaRashbo to support and substantiate the psak of Mahari Weil. And the Tshuvas HaRashba befetish deals with dinay arvis. So obviously, there's a machlokes. This din in Siman Kuf Chav Tes. When Reuven tells Shimon, you could lend money to Levi, and I know he has the money to pay, he has the means, he is trustworthy, and at the end, Levi didn't pay, and Reuven bears responsibility. So one approach, and that is Mahari Weil, the source of this halacha. Like the Gon and the Nesivis, both on the spot Siman Kuf Chav Tes say, this is Medina Nezikin, and it is comparable to Maradin L'Shulchani. But the Ramah writes it in Siman Kuf Chav Tes, not in Siman Shin Vav, and that is Hilchas Orev. And in Darkei Moshe's mashma, we're dealing with Dinay Orev. So what was the question halacha lamaisa? It's a very disturbing question, and it happens all the time, and I try to be respectful. Goes without saying, I won't mention any names. But a person who had limited mental capacity. He was a Nechei Tzahal. He was a soldier. He had a terrible brain injury, and that was many years ago. And when he came to Beis Din, it was obvious that he has limited mental capacity. His mother got a Yerusha. And he was, strangely, the court made him a custodian on his mother's money because she was elderly. I wonder what stupid judge, seeing this person, would give him the responsibility. Masa shahoyo kachoyo. And he asked his Rav, where should I invest my old mother's money? She was in an old age home. And the Rav gave him an eitzah, invest with this guy. He's a financial whiz. He gives a lot of interest. Everybody that invested money with him made a lot of money. We know this story, Rabbi Say. We know this story. And I don't even need to tell you how the story ended. How the story ended. 2 or 3 payments, he got a lot of money, and then all went down the drain. And this person is Tovei the Rav and Beis Din. I didn't even know Pliny Almoini. You told me to invest my money with him, and I want my money back. It's my mother's money. It's my old mother's money. I can't do this to my mother. You know, it's not my money, it's her money, and you told me to invest. And it was obvious that the guy was he was a crook. And this always happens again and again in our society, and it's so troubling. So, as you could imagine, to be Machayev a Rav, to pay for a bad eitzah, so many Rabbanim and Rebbes would be penniless if we would paskin that a Rebbe or a Rav bears responsibility for financial eitzahs that he gives. I never give people financial eitzahs, never. And when people come to ask me how to invest, I say, Rabbi Say, if you would know my track record, you would run out of this room. You're not in the right place. You know. So the question was, does the Rav bear responsibility? So in this halacha that we just learned in Siman Kuf Chof Tes, there's a huge discussion because in the Gemara there's a machlokes, Chazida alach kesamichna. He only bears responsibility if the shulchani, it was made clear to the shulchani, and the person that asked the shulchani to give an opinion says to the shulchani, I want you to know I rely on you. It is only then that he bears responsibility. Let's go back to the sug of Maradun al-Shulchani. Where's the Shulchan Aruch in our booklet? Siman Shin Vav. It is on page 42, I think. Page 42. Sivav, as I quoted before. Hamaradin al-Shulchani v'yom al-Yafahu v'nimtzero. Im beschara ohu chayev l'shalem. Af al pishu boki v'en etzorech l'slamed. Ve'im bechinam ra'uhu, if he's not getting paid, poto v'hu shia boki she'en etzorech l'slamed. Ve'im einoi boki chayev l'shalem af al pishu bechinam. And now the Shulchan Aruch says, V'hu sheyoyim l'shulchani olecha ani soymech. O shehoyu advorim marim shu soymech al riyosei v'lo yar'e la'acherim. There are more comments. Yesh oimrim da'afilu stomen nama chayev. U'mekol mokem hasvar arashaynen ara ikar. So there are more, even though he quotes a dissenting opinion, Halacha L'Maisa agrees with the Mechaber. The Shulchani bears no responsibility unless it was made clear to him, I am relying on you. Either he needs to say it explicitly or Mucha Chamilsa. So if it is obvious, if it's Mucha Chamilsa, then even though there was no clear stipulation, he didn't say, I'm relying on you, the person that gave the eitzah, the shulchani, bears responsibility. So the case we were dealing with, there were three questions. Is it muchach hamilsa de alach kasamichna? And that was an argument between the Rav and the person that was convinced by the Rav to invest his money with that third party. The Rav said, I gave you an eitzah, took a week till you came back to me. I assumed you asked some other Rabbonim or other mumchim as well. The problem was that the Rav actually wrote up the shtar halva, he wrote up the iska, and he was directly involved in encouraging and facilitating this investment. He not only gave an eitzah, he came back, he formulated the shtar iska, but nevertheless the Rav argued, I assumed you're asking other people as well. So we had to deal with, is it muchach hamilsa? I doubt that would be nosav and nosam biyad, but it definitely would logically lead to the maskona that Olav Samach, you were the one that gave the eitzah, you were the one that actually facilitated this entire deal. The second question is, was it b'sachar? So the person that invested the money brought Eidim to testify that this financial whiz was giving money to the Rav all the time. He was one of his supporters. And it was very likely that even from this money, from this investment, he gave a maisa. So he didn't pay him directly for his services, but he did have a vested interest in getting this deal through, because that person was one of the supporters of the Rav, and we couldn't verify this, but the investor argued, he gave you maisa from all the monies that you brought him. Would that be considered oisa b'sachar? He's not getting paid directly for his services, but he does have a financial interest. And the third question is, going back to page 61, V'hoyo sheker. V'hoyo sheker. What does V'hoyo sheker mean? That is page 60, going back to the Ramon Siman Kuf Chav Tes. So, Afelo loines arev behedya, rak sho'oim el malva, lehalvois leloiva ki batuachu, v'oso al piv, v'hoyo sheker. So that is one of the fundamental questions. What does v'hoyo sheker mean? If the person had the money at the time, but when the day of payment came, he no longer had the money, could we define that as v'hoyo sheker? V'hoyo sheker seems to indicate similar to maradin al-shulchani. But maradin al-shulchani, in real time, it was sheker. You said it's pure gold, and it wasn't. You said it's pure silver, and it wasn't. So in our case, could we say v'hoyo sheker? Maybe at the time, in his bank account, he had a lot of money. Very likely that at the time he had a lot of money. But those monies are never to stay, So, So Reb Shlomo, this brings us once again back to the fundamental sugya of Germi. And I assume everybody remembers what we said when we learned Germi. When was that? 10 years ago or so? I don't remember when. One of the opinions of Germi is miyad. Another one is bori hezeika. The Rambam paskins, every grama is chayiv. The Rambam has a totally different approach to Germi. And the Shach explains the Rambam, it all depends on the level of pshia, on the level of responsibility. So I said before, we're not going to get into the details of Garmi, because Garmi is actually a different sugya. So the three fundamental questions, or the four fundamental questions in our Din Torah was, is this considered bisachar? Are we confident, muchach milsa, and it was clear to the Rav that he relies on him? Is he a mumcha? Definitely not. Definitely not. If he would be a mumcha, needless to say. How do we define a mumcha? I don't think any Rav is a mumcha. If he's a mumcha, maybe he shouldn't be a Rav. Maybe he should be a financial advisor. If he's a real Rav, he shouldn't be a mumcha in investments. What does it have to do with your job, with your tafkid? That is question number 3. Would we say he's a mumcha because he has Ruach HaKodesh? I don't know. And the 4th question is, V'hoyu sheker. V'hoyu sheker seems clearly to say, I know that he has money in the bank, and he did not have money in the bank. That would mean V'hoyu sheker. If I thought he is trustworthy, and at the end he's not paying, and maybe he is trustworthy, it happens, Rabbi say. Let's look at the other side of the Metzias. Sometimes wonderful people take loans, and when time comes, they don't have the means to pay. And that is also quite common. He's a tzaddik, he's a yoshar. It happens all the time. I lended so much money to people. If all my debtors would pay, I probably could buy a dira somewhere, and I have no tinus, because those people are, I trust they're honest people, and they intend to pay. So, what does V'hoyu sheker mean? The fact that a person took a loan, and I encourage you to give the loan, and at the end he doesn't pay, that does not make me liable. I know the person, I thought he will pay. V'hoyu sheker is only if I told him I know he has the means. V'nisbar I'm afraid that he did not have the means, and the information you gave me was wrong information in real time. So what was the psak? This halacha might depend on the 2 different interpretations in Siman Kuf Chavtes. Are we dealing with Dina Mazik or Dina Yorav? Because both parties agreed that the Rav did tell him, I'm not responsible. So as Orev, we cannot be Mechayev him. If he clearly said, I'm not a Orev. But if this din is based on Dinei Mazik, and we are convinced Shesomach Olav, otherwise he wouldn't invest the money, maybe Medina Mazik we could be Mechayev. The psak was that the Rav does not need to pay because of the many sveikas. We cannot verify V'hoyu sheker. It is a question whether this would be considered sachar, and I admit I felt very uncomfortable, and therefore I did write in the psak, Chayev l'shalem l'tzeis yedei shomayim. If I'm not mistaken, after 25 years, did we have sugya the Kallah, the gather of l'tzeis yedei shomayim, which is a huge sugya? Did we ever have the sugya? I suggest maybe for next year, because it's such a fascinating sugya, the different levels of Midas Chasidus, Ruach HaChomem Noiche Heimeno, Chayev B'dinei Shemayim, B'boretzeis Yedei Shemayim, so many different levels. So the psak was, we cannot be Mechayev the Rav. And I also, thought about this. If we would be Mechayev the Rav to pay, as I said before, Lo henachtu bas lerabonim. But I do think Rabbanim need to be so careful. Person wants to invest, give him a bracha. Give him a bracha. No, I mean seriously, not sarcastically. Your job is to give him a bracha. Advise him to be sensible. Send him to people that understand. Send him to people that understand business. And especially, this case I put on the table is horrendous. If you have any vested interest, even b'derech l'chayka, this is shaychad. You're in a geya b'dover. If this person is one of your supporters, how could you do this? So I felt very uncomfortable giving musar to that Rav because he was a choshev person. He was considered to be a choshev person. So I wrote that he's chayav l'tzeis yedei shamayim, and I brought sources that in a similar case he is chayav l'tzeis yedei shamayim, but we were not machayiv him to pay because by clear halachic criteria there are many sfeikus. How do we define a mumcha? Rabbanim and Rebbes give financial aids all the time. So maybe people consider them a mumcha. Hoyu sheker, that is suffix number 2. How do we define? Now, I didn't know personally that financial whiz. I didn't know him. How could I say? I assume, like when this happens all the time, that he was bad, but I didn't know him. So one question was, Hoyu sheker. How do we define the mumcha? Is this considered sachar? He wasn't paid directly for his services, but he definitely had an interest in giving this eitzah, a financial interest.
Isn't that the ramaz of the future payment, the shayla if it's sachar or not? The ramaz, the future receipt of money is considered sachar.
But even a future receiver, it must be directly tied in. I'm not giving you money now, but in the future you will be getting money from being paid for your services. So because of the many questions, the psak was we cannot be machayev thereof. But this is so important, and this is a message which needs to go out. When you invest money, be careful. Know what you're doing. Don't rely on your Rav when he gives financial aids. And even more important to the Rabbanim, don't give financial advice. It is not your field. It's not what you're supposed to do. Tell the person if he wants a bracha, you're going to give him a bracha. He should be successful. Advise him to take upon himself to give meiser, and that is his gula for his success. But abstain from giving financial advice. This is not something you should be doing. So going back to the fundamental yesodis of our sugyam, Kuf Chof Tes is tied in to Shin Vav, as we see in the Biragra on the spot, and in the Marivayel. Fundamentally, these two halachas, Shin Vav, Siv Daled and Siv Vav, are on the same page, Bava Kamet Tzadik Tes Omed Beis, the two fundamental sugyas, and Maziku, Poisheahu, and the Machlokes HaRishonim. What is the din of Tabach Umen Shekilkel based on? Is it din and Ezekin, or maybe it is Dinei Shoimrim? And once again, it's a big, not only a covet, but a schus for me to be here, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy every moment of this Yarchei Kallah. So just one moment. This week is Parshas Mishpotim, as I said in the beginning of our Shiur. The Ramban writes in his introduction to Chumash Shemois that Chumash Shemois is defined as Sefer HaGolus v'HaGeula. And then the Ramban asks, but only a third of the Sefer deals with Golus and Geula. In Parshas B'Shalach, the Geula was over, and we sang Shiras Hayam. So why is the entire Sefer defined as Sefer HaGolus v'HaGeula? And the Ramban writes, Geula to us is not only about personal freedom, nor about national sovereignty. Ad asher el malas avoisam yashuvun. It is only when we will be restored to the heights, to the greatness of our forefathers, of the Avos, only then could we be defined as redeemed, as Geulim. And therefore the entire Sefer, from beginning to end, from Aleph till Tov, is Sefer Golos VaGeula. The first 4 parshas, Shmois ve'Eiro Boi B'Shalach, deal with the actual Geula and leaving Eretz Mitzrayim as free people. But then Yisro Mishpotim is about Kabbalah Torah. And that is part of the Geula. Before it even started, Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Zerachu oiski b'tzeischem miMitzrayim tavden es u'alakim al ha'ar hazeh. And Rashi has 2 different perushim. What does it mean, Zerachu ois? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm taking you out of Mitzrayim, and bear in mind, we're going to Har Sinai. And that is why I'm taking you out of Eretz Mitzrayim. Kili b'nei Yisrael avodim, avodehem, asher etzei yisem yeretz Mitzrayim. And even that is not the end of the story. The last parshas, 5 parshas, Mishkan veKallah. And it is only when they were zoiche to Ashoras Hashchina, that was the climax and culmination of Geula. So the entire Sefer is called Sefer Hagulas v'Hageula. And this week's parsha we learn v'kol ha'am ro'in es ha'kolos. And the Mechilta says, Hayu ro'in es ha'nishma v'shoimen es ha'nera. They saw the voices and they heard the sights. How could you hear voices and how could you see? How could you hear sights? So obviously, this is Lamala Mederech HaTeva. This is something that we cannot understand in natural phenomena. But there's an amazing pshat, B'derech Musa, B'derech Hasidus, in B'nei Yissaschar Chodesh Nisan, and a Nefesh HaChaim Shar Aleph. So the Nefesh HaChaim was the greatest Talmud of the Gra, and the B'nei Yissaschar, one of the great Chassidish masters, Chassidish Rabbeim, and if both say the same pshat, it bears special validity. And they both say B'derech Musar. Kodesh Baruch Hu bestowed upon humankind 5 senses: Re'iyah, Shmiya, we taste, we smell, and we feel. Mishush Yadayim. And all the information we achieve are through these 5 chushim. You know nothing, only what is fed to you, to your intelligence, by Chameshes HaChushim, which is the most tangible, which is the most reliable. Obviously, Re'iyas Einayim. My great Rebbe, the Kloser Rebbe, used to quote the Divrei Chaim. If a Choser tells you I saw, maybe he heard. If he tells you I heard, Shab and Sheker. You know, that was the sprach of the Kloser Rebbe. So that's just some sharper word of the Divrei Chaim. But it is clear that the most reliable of all these senses is what you see. And it is also reflected by Chazal. Sanhedrin sharo b'yechad shehoreges hanefesh. They don't need testimony. Lo teishmiya gedoyle Maria. If a Sanhedrin could rely on Adam, they definitely could rely on what they saw themselves. If they saw, what do you need Adam? However, ba'olam haruchani, in our spiritual world, Shmiya means more than Riyah. The most important and fundamental things in our life, no one ever saw. Every day in the morning, we start Avodas Yom and we say, Elokai, Neshama shenasato b'tahiru v'yato b'rosato yetzarta. Nobody ever saw a Neshama. We don't know how it looks. Nobody ever saw a Malach. So the Svasemes, the Imre Emes, and this is an amazing word which I say many times. The Imre Emes said, my father, the Svasemes, saw Malachim. he actually saw malachim. How do I know? Because I heard him saying that the Kotzker Rebbe looked like a malach. If he never saw a malach, how could he say the Kotzker Rebbe looked like a malach? That's the Imre Emes. Amazing. To them, a word was a word. And truth was truth. So the Imre Emes said, if my father never saw a malach, he wouldn't say the Kotzker Rebbe looked like a malach. So maybe some people did see malachim, but most of us didn't. And the most important factor, the only most important factor in Yiddish Leben is Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Emunah Sayichud. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. No one ever saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not even Moshe Rabbeinu. Ki lo yir'ani ha'odam v'chai. V'rui says Achorai, v'ponai lo yir'a'u. So to us, Avoseinu sipru lanu. What we heard from our fathers, and they heard from their fathers, and our Rebbeim, that is reality. And that means more than anything else. So the Bnei Esos and the Nefesh Chaim said, B'shas Matan Torah, Klal Yisrael were elevated to a madrega. Hoyeroyen es anishma. What they heard was so tangible and so real as if they saw. And this entire material world was so distant to them, and they were so detached from Gashmias, as if Shoimen es Anela. That's a pshat we find in Nefesh HaChaim and in Bnei Yisachar. This is a Gemara in Bava Basra of Ayin Hey. Ki hoda Rabbi Yochanan, hoye Yoshe v'doirish. Rabbi Yochanan was sitting in the Mismedesh and he darshan, Mai dechsiv, v'samti kod kodshim shoysayach v'shiurayach avnei egedach. Also the Kodesh Baruch Hu lahevi avonim tovim v'margioli Hashem shloisha mama. Kodesh Baruch Hu will bring precious gems, diamonds and emeralds. Shloisha mama v'choykeg bohem eser al esrim v'mamidam b'shar Yerushalayim. Lig olav oisoi talmid. And one of the Talmidim in Mismedish was amused. It seemed funny to him. And he said, we don't, in the world, we don't find a diamond or an emerald or a ruby as big as the egg of a little bird. How could it be shloisha mama? It's funny, it's absurd. Ligleg olav oisoi talmid. Leyomim hefliga svinosa b'yam. That Talmud was on a boat, and lo and behold, he sees Malachim de Menasra Avonim Shem Shloisha Mamo. And he asks them, Eilen Leman, what are you doing? Where are these precious stones going? And the Malachim tell him, Osed HaKadosh Baruch Hu Amidam B'shar Yerushalayim. He was amazed. He cannot wait till he comes back to shore. He storms into the Bismedish and he says, Rabbi Droish, Ka'asher Omarto, Kain Roisi. We learned Bava Basa Ayin not long ago in Daf Yomi. Maybe some of you remember the Gemara, but those that don't remember, how do you guess Rabbi Yochanan responds? Omed v'nashokoy al roishoi. He kissed his forehead. He banged on the table and he said, everybody be quiet. You must listen to this. Tell them what you saw. No. Rabbi Yochanan angrily responded, Reika, Reik shekamoischo, lulei ro'iso loi hemanto, you have be'enav, v'asoi gal shalat somis. And I ask, he wasn't punished when he laughed. He wasn't punished when it seemed to him amusing and strange. When was he punished? When he comes back to verify and to be machazik? Why? I think it is Reiko, Lule Ro'isu Lo Hemanto. I dash in the posuk. You don't believe anything unless you see what type of a Jew are you? What type of a Yid are you? So when I say a drosha based on a posuk, seems funny. When you see, it is only then that you believe. And I think in a way it's midah keneged midah, because What is a person without a neshama? Nobody ever saw a neshama. Take the neshama away from a person, what is left is a gal shalatzonis. I wish to believe that at the end of the story he did Tchias HaMesim. I hope so. Because to me, does he deserve to die? You know, it's an important message in Musar. I hope at the end of the day, Yoav Be'enov, one more time, and he said, now go back to the Bismedrish. Next time I say a drasha, believe what I say. So to us, what we hear is far more important than what you see. Because the most important things in our life, no one ever saw. We believe because our fathers believed, and our forefathers believed. Ve'hegadatu levincho. Ve'limadete moisem es benechem. We believe in our Messiah. We believe because we feel, and that is the way we know. And that is the pshat of the Bnei Yisachar and the Nefesh HaChaim. O Yeshoymen esanira v'royen esanishma. And every Shabbos we say, V'hu yashmiyenu beracham of shenis le'enei kol chai lemar. Doesn't make sense. V'hu yashmiyenu should be ba'oznei kol chai lemar. But the Pasuk says, V'hu yashmiyenu beracham of shenis le'enei kol chai lemar. The Yosed Lovo, each and every one of us, will be once again elevated to the Madrega of Har Sinai, and we should be Zoche B'Kura B'Yomeinu V'hu Yashmiyenu Beracham of Shenes Le'enei Kol Chai Leimor Hengo Alti Eschem Achres Kereishes B'Yois Luchem Le'Elokim B'Mheru V'Yomeinu Omeinu.